It is February 21st, 2024. It's right around 10:04 a.m. Central Time. And college football is still the greatest sport on the face of the planet. Welcome into the Hard Count. We talk college football, in fact, every single day. We got a lot to unpack today, as we always do on this very show. For those of y'all that had your head on a swivel on this show yesterday while we were on the air, it got announced, hey, guess what? We got a brand new playoff format. The old 5+7 model going into effect to the surprise of absolutely nobody. But what does this mean? And more importantly, will you stop expanding the playoff? 12 is enough. We'll get to that here in a second. We got our thoughts on that. Also, we got Pete Nakos joining the show. Every time we have something that has to do with legal jargon or has to do with the powers that be, we hit up Pete because, quite frankly, he's one of the most intelligent people we know. So he's going to join the show and give us his 2 cents on the Florida State versus the ACC and kind of what's going on there. Could we see Florida State leaving? Is that becoming more and more of a reality? And also, if Florida State does leave, we understand how this works now. You don't just leave by your lonesome. It's a buddy system when it comes to conference realignment. So who could be leaving with Florida State? Well, we'll have Pete on the show to make sense of it all. Also, for those of y'all that have been keeping track, LSU in 2025, I know signing day was like all of 15 minutes ago. It feels like from that most recent signing period. But in 2025, Brian Kelly and co., they are recruiting like a program, as we like to say on this show. So we'll give you our thoughts on LSU and what that means for the future for the Tigers and what could be happening in Baton Rouge there when it comes to some things they could be winning in the future. Got some thoughts there. When it comes to the future as well, I thought it'd be the right time to do this together. Kind of hinted at it here for a little bit. There's a lot of power rankings and ranking of things for next season that are being talked about right now, and we will participate in that, of course, in the near future. But what I think would be most helpful for us to do right now as a college football community on this show is talk about our projection rankings. Now, I put out a call to action on my Twitter last night at JD Pickell, and I said, if you had to project the top 5 teams in the SEC over the course of the next 3 seasons, who would it be? So that's not a prediction for next season. It's not a prediction for who's going to win the SEC in 2024. But over the course of the next 3 years, if you were placing a bet, who would you project to be the top 5 teams in that conference? So I got my own list for you here. I'm sure we will all be in agreement. I got a ton of great responses from you all via my Twitter page last night, so that was a lot of fun to unpack those. I'll give you mine. We will discuss them together. And like I said, I'm sure there will be a lot of great debate for us to get after there together. All right, can't waste too much more time. Quick PSA, it's that time of the year where we are interviewing head coaches. So one, let me know who you want us to interview because we're going to do our best to interview anybody and everybody that we can get a chance to talk to because we're very fortunate to be able to do that. Second, to know who we're talking to, make sure you're following me on all the social channels because, yes, we'll announce that on this show, obviously, whenever we have more information for you to give. But in real time, if you're following me on Instagram, you're following me on Twitter, we will announce those as soon as we have them recorded. I would suggest making sure you're following me on there today because I think we have an announcement coming today for who our next head coach is going to be. All right, no more time to waste. We'll get right to it. We got Pete Nakos here joining us in a matter of 7 or so minutes to talk Florida State and his thoughts on this expanded playoff model. Want us to circle up right now on this show. We talked about it in a one-off video yesterday. What does this 5+7 format mean for the future of college football? Well, again, this was not surprising that we have the 5+7 format going forward. What does the 5+7 format even mean? Essentially, the college football playoff approved that the 5 highest seeded conference champions are all locked into a college football playoff berth. Now, that does not mean that those 5 highest seeded conference champions are going to be ranked 1 through 5. You would imagine those Power 4 conference champions will be somewhere within that top 4, but then that 7 in the 5+7 format is going to be the next highest ranked teams. 7 next highest ranked teams, that is. So just so we're on the same page here, if you are the 5th highest seeded conference champion, which you would imagine will be a G5 team, let's just say Liberty, for example, that does not lock you in to that 5 seed. You might be the 12 seed. You might be the 9 seed. Not sure where you would be, but just so we're on the same page there, that's, I think, an important note for this whole thing. So, not a surprise. We knew we were going to probably something like this whenever the Pac-12 sort of imploded. But here's the real kicker for me. This college football playoff format is only in effect for the next 2 seasons. 2024, 2025, that's it. So that means by 2026, we're either going to keep going this way or we'll go another direction. Kind of a fork in the road of sorts. So here's my concern. And I said this in the one-off video yesterday. I'm going to say it again right now. I am concerned that the people in control only care about money. And I understand, man, we all got, bills to pay. A lot of us have families to support. We got ourselves to support. Like, that's a whole thing. But the folks that run the show in this arena, they slick their hair back. They wear a bow tie to work. They wear a suit to work. They're lawyers. They're MBA types. And I got nothing against lawyers. I got nothing against the people that have MBAs. Suits is one of my favorite shows. I digress. But the reality here is those people that are money motivated are not thinking necessarily all the time about the health and the well-being of college football as a sport. So the point I'm getting to here is don't expand the playoff any further. My concern is you're going to see the revenue jump through the roof, which is what's going to happen here when we go to 12 teams this upcoming season, and this playoff field's going to be electric. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited to watch the games. They'll make for some great matchups. The TV ratings will be outrageous. You're going to see a lot of money by nature of having more games played in the playoff format. So the concern is, okay, more money from more games. Well, heck, we're in charge here. This deal is up now. We're in 2026. We can expand the playoff field even more and make more money. Y'all, I cannot tell you how much that would frustrate me. I was actually, we're sort of dying on this hill now, so we'll just move past this quickly, but we were always saying, hey, 4 is the right number. If you want to expand it, let's not triple the field. Let's just go to like 6 teams. If you want to get crazy, go to 8 teams, but going to 12 teams right off the bat felt like a knee-jerk reaction. I'm concerned we're going to keep going down that path. Because, again, what you're going to see here is people that see dollar signs, fly close to the sun, and say, well, more money is a good thing for everybody, right? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. And the one take that I think really is confusing to me is folks that hear you say, I don't want the expanded playoff, and they say, well, you don't like football? You don't want to see more competitive football games? You don't want to see these big brands play each other in the most meaningful part of the year? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I want less meaningful football games. I'm saying I want more meaningful football games. The difference is I just want those to happen in that 12-week span we get called the regular season. From late August to late November, that's the playoff games that I want to watch. And when I say playoff games, I'm not talking about single elimination. I'm talking about Ohio State, Michigan, meaning as much as humanly possible. The Red River rivalry, when they meet up in the Cotton Bowl, meaning as much as humanly possible. Those games that happen in September, I want USC, LSU to mean as much as humanly possible. That's the meaningful football that I want us to experience because that's what's made college football so special. And you'll hear some people say, well, JD, every major sport has a playoff format like this. It's time that college football got with it. Well, college football isn't like every other major sport. In fact, you'll notice there's a lot of people that love college football with every fiber of their being that actually don't care at all about the NBA, don't really care that much at all about the NFL or Major League Baseball, whatever. Like, we love college football because it's college football, not because it's like the NFL or because it's the NBA, and I think that's important to remember here. The college football fan is not the average sports fan. It's the diehard college football fan. And what's made this thing so special throughout the course of history is that fall Saturdays have been sacred and mean as much as humanly possible, there's that phrase again, to all of us on every single Saturday. It doesn't matter if you're playing Samford. It didn't matter if you were playing USC. It didn't matter if you were playing Alabama. That game had an impact on what the rest of your postseason could look like. We're moving into an era now. If we go to like 16 or 24 or whatever, we'll talk to Pete here in a second to kind of get his gauge for this. The more games that we play in the postseason, that's going to dilute the value of the regular season. Because at a certain point now, you can lose 3 games. And some of these teams now, we look at the schedule and we understand, like, I may not have more than 3 losable games on my schedule to begin with when it comes to roster comparison any given weekend. Now, I understand that's not necessarily always the case every single year. It's college football, so there's a ton of variance every single Saturday. That's why we love it. But just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Expanding the playoff would not be the way that we would vote. I'd love to see it stay at 12. Anything more than that, I think, would be a massive mistake from the powers that be. So, heck, maybe we'll start a petition. Maybe we'll get something going to kind of fight the power a little bit here. But when it comes to the college football playoff, 5+7 felt like the right move for this era. But in the future, man, we go to 2026, I dearly hope and pray that we do not go more than 12 teams because that would be a massive mistake for the future of this sport and for where we're headed here in the not-too-distant future. So let me know how y'all feel about this, man. 5+7 is the format for right now. Going to get Pete Nakos on here in just a second to unpack that and everything going on with Florida State and the ACC, but that's the way that it feels to me. Would love to see it stay where it is when it comes to what the college football playoff format is right now. All right, moving right along here. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you've subscribed to the channel. Nick, how we doing with Pete? Pete jumping on? All right, awesome. Welcoming on now, the man, the myth, the legend, best reporter in the game, Pete Nakos. Pete, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
What's shaking, JD?
Yeah, you're looking
Happy
good.
Happy Wednesday, man.
You looking
We're
good?
trying.
You feeling good? I mean, are you sleeping at all?
I'm feeling
The portal's
good.
kind of slowed down?
I'm getting the 8 hours of sleep, so I am ready to do this.
Phenomenal. You're rested. You're refreshed. Just in time for Florida State to maybe be hitting the portal, man. What's going on there? Because I called you yesterday, and I was like, Pete, there's a lot of jargon here. There's a lot of words that, quite frankly, have a lot of syllables that I don't understand. What's going on with Florida State in the ACC, and is there a chance they hit the portal and leave for another conference?
You know, I think it's a little too early to say they're going to leave, but we could see things headed in that direction maybe in the foreseeable future. Obviously, the ACC and Florida State have filed lawsuits against each other. Florida State in Florida, ACC in North Carolina, and that kind of remains to be seen. But in a filing from the ACC on Friday, the conference suggested that it might be open to negotiation by using the phrase commercial possibility when referring to the grant of rights. And yeah, I mean, I think Florida State wouldn't be doing this if they're not ready to go through the process of hitting the portal possibly. So yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out, but I think that negotiations could definitely be in the future.
And is this kind of moving into a territory where it's less about when, or less about when and less about if and more about when it comes to this? Because I think it's sort of on the top of mind now as buzz grows. It's like, is this inevitable that we see Florida State eventually make a move to a different conference?
I think it's safe to say that Florida State is doing everything it can to get outside of the ACC. Our Jeff Cameron at War Chant made the point when he was on with Andy Staples earlier this week that he's heard from some sources that Florida State's ready to pay $150 million. And I think he also mentioned that the ACC could be looking at something more around the $250 million range, and that's for the exit fee and to purchase out the grant of rights. And I think Florida State would be willing to do that. So definitely could be in the cards.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 150 to 200, heck, maybe even $572 million question is where would they go? Is it the SEC? Is it the Big Ten? Those kind of feel like they'd be the prime suspects. Is there a fit in your mind if we're speculating wildly here?
Those would be the only two. I mean, I think the way you have to look at it, right, is the reason why they want to leave the ACC is because they know the ACC really doesn't have the value of the SEC and the Big Ten. And you look at that ESPN deal that's through June 2036. Florida State wants out, man. I mean, all the big brands right now are in the SEC and the Big Ten. I know we were talking about it on the phone yesterday, but you can make just so much more money in those two conferences right now, and it's they have all the power. And we're going to talk about the college football playoff here in a minute, but there's a reason why Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey are kind of running things in Dallas today. Yeah,
and I mean, with Florida State, like, I think a lot of folks in SEC country are like, hey, go to the Big Ten. Get them to the Big Ten. We're happy having Florida be our one school in the SEC. That's the Florida school in our conference. Is the Big Ten kind of the betting favorite in your mind, with them potentially going coast to coast and having USC and Florida State in the boat there at that point?
I'm not ready to say there's a betting favorite one way or the other. Sure. But I mean, you make a really good point that the SEC is really happy with Florida kind of being their flagship school in the state of Florida. So yeah, I mean, I think it's one or the other. I think the one thing that really intrigues me the most, JD, is if Florida State leaves, I mean, what value does the ACC have anymore? Because obviously Clemson and North Carolina will want to test the waters too.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's like, hey, we're kind of baking most of the pie here. We're taking home a smaller slice, and Northwestern is making more money than us. Vanderbilt's making more money than us, and that's no shade to those schools. But like you said, with the brand that Florida State has and the brand power they bring to the ACC, feels a little bit counterintuitive for those schools to be the ones that are raking in more than the Noles at this point. Last question here. We've seen how this works, man. It's a buddy system when it comes to conference realignment. Is there a school that you would tie to Florida State and their potential exit from the ACC that could go with them to the Big Ten or the SEC?
Yeah, I would just say looking back over the last 18 months, it's always kind of been Clemson that we've talked about when you talk about Florida State leaving the ACC. So I would have to think that I don't know if Clemson's tied to them at the moment, but I think Clemson is probably the most aggressive in looking at ways to get outside the ACC next to Florida State, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Tigers try to make a move to get involved here.
There we go, man. Dabo and the boys in Florida State, they could be – I mean, that'd be one of the first times that Clemson has messed around in the portal, honestly, if they were to make an exit out of the ACC. Now,
I think that, yeah.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
No, that's a great point. The one thing I do want to mention, though, is while Clemson is trying to maybe get out of the ACC, I think North Carolina or Virginia is arguably, or Miami, are kind of more attractive to the SEC and the Big Ten than Clemson, and that will just be something to watch as we see this plays out.
I was going to say Miami being in the boat could also, I feel like, just from where I'm sitting, from a football standpoint, make a lot of sense for them to be having two schools within the Big Ten going to the state of Florida. Like, I don't know. We'll see how it all shakes out. And it's funny because we were talking yesterday too. It feels like it's always trending one way. It's always, hey, this is how it's going to be. And then behind closed doors, under the cover of a conversation or a headline, it goes the completely other direction. And then we all find out together at one, sweeping headline.
That's how it goes.
It's how it goes, baby. It's how it goes. Life in the portal and life in conference realignment, which I'm, of course, paralleling here to the portal. Let's switch gears here. Pete, you were all over this when it comes to the 5+7 format becoming a reality. You have a great article on on3.com about this. Level of surprise with them going with 5+7. Any thoughts on like the impact here for the college football playoff?
The level of surprise is zero. A lot of people have been talking about this since the Pac-12 fell apart this summer. It makes a lot of sense because it opens up more automatic qualifiers. So now you could see the SEC or the Big Ten probably having like anywhere from maybe 2 or 3, maybe even 4 schools in the playoff. It makes a lot of sense. The one thing that really jumps out to me is there's no requirement on like the ranking, right? So like the 5th automatic qualifier, right, is a conference champion, and it doesn't matter if they're like the number 25 or number 26 team in the country. They still get the automatic qualifier.
I mean, my first thought here, Pete, was what happens with Notre Dame? Because with them not being in a conference, it sounds like the way that I'm reading this and the way that everyone's talking about it, like Notre Dame cannot be eligible for that first round bye, which I understand, man. The NBC money is good, but is it good enough to miss a first round bye when you're the number 1 ranked team in the country and you're sitting out of the conference championship weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a decision Notre Dame's made. I think it's really important to make clear, too, that this is a decision that Notre Dame has kind of made since the beginning of these college football playoff talks. And Notre Dame does have a seat on those, like the board of commissioners that make up a lot of these college football playoff decisions. But no, you're right, man. If Notre Dame makes the playoff, it's going to be really tough. They're going to have to win 4 games in a row to win a national championship. I mean, and that includes even hosting a first-round game on campus or potentially hitting the road. I mean, it's a lot, man. It's a lot.
It's crazy. And I'm almost wondering, like, it's one thing to talk about it right now before we get to this 12-team playoff era, but, like, I'm wondering if we get to a point where Notre Dame, let's just say we're in a world where Marcus Freeman's got the boys cooking and they're undefeated, number 1 in the country, and then they get upset in the first round by, insert whatever team you want to there because they didn't get a first-round bye. At that point, would the conversation kind of catch some traction of like, okay, hey, the money we could make from winning a national championship, the money that we'd get from exposure, like Notre Dame needs that really. But I mean, just what it would do for their school long term, it feels like at a certain point in practice, would the heat not turn up for Notre Dame to maybe join a conference in the future? Is that crazy to speculate?
I don't know if it's crazy to speculate. I also don't know if it's going to like an automatic thing, right? Everyone's always thought the Big Ten would make the most sense. But at the same time, Notre Dame just signed a new deal with NBC. They're locked in for a little while. Like, I don't know how feasible it is to think that Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish are going to leave Independence. And it's obviously something that alums there have always kind of clutched onto and really love. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. I think we kind of need to see the 12-team playoff in action before we really jump to any conclusions.
Dude, it's going to be awesome. I mean, I kind of went this whole way kicking and screaming, staying at 4, but once we get this field, it's going to be a lot of fun. But we talked about it here before you jumped on, Pete. Like, we only have this format for the next 2 seasons. Where do you see this thing headed? Are we going to expand? Are we going to stay at 12? Too early to tell. What's your gut feeling on how this whole thing is shaking out?
So the really big thing I think a lot of people need to pay attention to is today in Dallas, the commissioners, along with Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick, are meeting. And there's a lot to unpack. They still need to figure out revenue distribution. They need to talk through this ESPN contract that has not been signed. That would pay out about $1.3 billion annually. And then the other really big thing that we're going to maybe hear about, JD, and you mentioned this yesterday when we talked, is Tony Petitti has mentioned that he would be open to reviewing the bracket and maybe expanding to 16 teams. And because nothing is really solid through after the 2025 season, there's a lot that needs talked about. There's a lot that need figures out. And I caught you right before I hopped on, and I know that you're not a fan of that 16-team playoff.
Man, I personally would just love to see us have as much emphasis as possible August through November. Maybe I'm yelling at a cloud here. Maybe I have turned into the old man that I've come to resent in some ways, talking about back in my day. But I don't know. It feels weird to me. It feels weird for us to keep expanding this thing. 12 feels like it could work.
I'm excited to see. I think we're going to do CFP bracketology. I can't wait. It's going to be fun to really chop it up.
Jake Crane put out a great tweet yesterday. He's like, who's going to be college football's Joe Lunardi? I'm going to go ahead and nominate you for that role. PD portal, PD brackets, PD realignment, just all the labels. All the labels, man.
Let's do it.
You're in for it?
Yeah,
okay, phenomenal.
I'm in for it. The one last thing, though, I want to mention when we're talking about the CFP is today's meeting is also the first one since the Big Ten and the SEC announced that joint advisory group. And just kind of taking the temperature of the room, I think a lot of people are interested to see how today's meeting goes, just because, more than ever, it's a clear sign that there's two super conferences right now in college football. And do Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti kind of call their shots and say what they want?
Well, that was kind of my next question was, you got Washington State's president over here spitting flames to Yahoo Sports and Ross Dellinger's article saying, hey, we got potentially, a conference. I think it was commissioners talking about the idea of having 4 automatic qualifiers for specific conferences. I'm imagining the fill in the blank there is the SEC or the Big Ten. Is that real? Yeah. Is that something we could see happen?
I don't want to say it's real or anything, but I think that with power comes Greg Sankey is in charge of the SEC, right, JD? And because of that, he's going to try to make as much money for the conference as possible. So if you can have 4 automatic qualifiers, that also equals a lot of dollar signs. So I think I think these conference commissioners are really trying to kind of talk through it, but also at the same time, you have to remember they're doing a job to make as much money as possible for their conference.
It's so fascinating. And I think you parlayed perfectly into the last question I wanted to ask you was, you're seeing dollar signs, more money, more problems, more teams, likely more money. Is there a reason why we wouldn't keep expanding this thing? Is there a reason why it wouldn't go to 16 in 2026?
I don't want to jump to conclusions and say it's a done deal to 16. I think a lot of people in that room really like the 12-team playoff. It allows for the group of 5 to get a team in. It allows for some parity. But yeah, I'm sure they're going to talk about 16, and I think we'll kind of have to see how it plays out. We're not going to get a final decision today, but if at 4 o'clock today we're seeing reports that there's real support for 16 teams, then I think we're going to have to really start thinking about it.
Golly, man. Golly, crazy times in college football. Dude, I appreciate you making time to jump on here and letting me just blow up your phone every single morning and say, hey, Pete, what does this word mean? Hey, Pete, what's going on with Florida State and the ACC and the college football playoff? I really appreciate you, brother.
This is my favorite part of the day, JD. I'll sit on for another 30 minutes, but I'll let you go.
You're the man. Looking fresh too in the rowback, bro. Always looking fresh.
I appreciate that.
Always looking fresh. Again, Pete Nakos, best in the game. I'm telling you. PD portal, PD brackets, PD realignment. He's got his fingers right here. For those of y'all that are listening on podcast, I'm putting my 2 fingers to where I'm assuming my pulse is. Pulse, college football, PD portal, he's got it locked in. We appreciate him making some time, man. That's not just me telling a story there. Pete Nakos genuinely 3 out of 5 weekdays, 3 out of 5 mornings during the week, I'm hitting him up and saying, Pete, there's a lot of words here with this Florida State document, this dismissal, whatever. What does this mean? Talk to me like I'm 5 years old, Pete, and he very kindly and patiently does. So we appreciate him for that, man. Again, one of the best in the game. Would encourage you to follow him to stay up with all things revolving around college football and more. Seeing a lot of good support in the chat here saying 16 teams is dumb. And then right after that, I see 16 please. So The people are divided as it stands right now when it comes to the college football playoff. Like the video and let me know what you think about 16 teams potentially here going forward. We've already made our case for how we feel about it. Now, we're not moving to 16 teams just yet. However, if we do go to 16 teams, you have to imagine the SEC is going to have a very large say in who those 16 teams are and maybe how many teams they get into that field of 16. And it's the time of the year, as I mentioned on a previous live show, where we rank things, we list things, we tier things right around now in college football. And this is a great exercise for us to do together. There's a lot of power rankings, and I think those are phenomenal. There's a lot of predictions for next season. I think those are phenomenal. I want us to fall somewhere in the middle of that and give you our projection rankings for the SEC over the course of the next 3 seasons. The question here is, and I put it on my Twitter page, @JDPiquel, who do you project to be the top 5 teams in the SEC, this is important now, over the course of the next 3 years? So not your 2024 champion, not who you think is going to win the college football playoff next year, just within the SEC, who are going to be the top 5 teams over the course of the next 3 seasons within that conference. We'll talk about it right now. Hey, make sure you're subscribed, by the way. If you're watching this in a one-off video, we appreciate you watching the show, but make sure you're watching this show when it's live on the air. A lot of fun. We get to talk in the live chat. Get to see Nick Brake's beautiful face. It's important for y'all to be dialed in. Best way to be dialed in is making sure you're subscribed to the show. So we appreciate you for that. So my factors in putting this list together, my top 5, you can kind of have your own factors. Again, that question I think is probably just the best headline to put this together. But my factors when piecing together my top 5 were leadership, essentially who your head coach is and the stability of your leadership, the base of your roster / your ability to acquire talent, so what you have currently in-house, and then your ability to go out and recruit the portal and the high school level. Also, this is important for me, commitment to ball. Commitment to ball from like the NIL level, from the administrative level. The best way to say that is your head coach getting a lot of yeses during the calendar year. He goes and asks for more money for your facilities. Yes. He goes and asks your collective for more money to sign this player or to keep players on their roster. Yes. That's the lens that I think we should view this through. So, let's get right to it. At number 5, I got the Alabama Crimson Tide. And for Kalen DeBoer, I think it's extremely fair for us to say that he is an elite coach. He's an elite coach. There's no way around it. I think it's also fair to say I don't know what he's going to be in the SEC. And so when it comes to long-term for him, I don't think there's any doubt about the level of commitment from Alabama for him. My question is, can they do this over a sustained period of time to acquire the top talent in the battleground that is SEC recruiting? All right, because I know you can do more with less. I've seen that multiple times. That's a huge selling point for me and why I thought Kalen DeBoer was great for Alabama. But long-term, can you do more with more? Because that's what I think will have to do to win in the SEC. I also think this is important to say. We may not know what Kalen DeBoer is as a head coach at Alabama within the SEC until after this 3-year period. Because Nick Saban, we've said this many times, he's left the cupboard stocked in Tuscaloosa. The portal did what the portal does whenever you have a head coaching change, but there's still a lot of talent in Tuscaloosa. Unproven? Sure, a lot of talent. It's kind of like when you go to someone's house for a potluck. Like they may have only made 1 or 2 dishes, but you eat good because there was a lot of other meals that were brought there and put on the table. So what I'm trying to say here is we may not know what kind of cook Kalen DeBoer is in the SEC until some of that food from the table is gone. But for right now, I think it's very fair to put Alabama at 5 just because we're kind of in wait-and-see mode about Kalen DeBoer as an SEC head coach. No questions about him as a head coach. I want to make sure we say that. No questions about him as a head coach. But when it comes to being a recruiter, which is required in the SEC for success, I'm a little bit more wait-and-see about Alabama. Now, this time next year, I'm going to have a different feel on this. We might have a little bit more of a evolved take on Kalen DeBoer, but for right now, I think 5 is fair for where they're at. Now, at number 4, I got Ole Miss. And the argument that I would take pushing back against Ole Miss is, well, hey, we'll see what happens with Lane Kiffin. He's always floated around with big jobs. I understand that. Who's to say it's not just his agent doing a good job for him? Because the Auburn job was available. I don't know if he got offered the job or not, but he's still at Ole Miss. The Alabama job became available. Again, I don't know if he was offered the job or not. He's still at Ole Miss. So it is what it is. 2 10-win seasons over the course of the last 3 years, so I got a track record for me to trust a little bit here for Lane Kiffin in Oxford. Here's what I love about Ole Miss, and here's what I love about Lane Kiffin. They have embraced everything that has to do with modern college football. NIL, they're winning in that space. Transfer portal, they're winning in that space. Modern offense, Matt Corral's there, Jackson Dart's there. Continue to win in that space, continue to have what they need to be successful and score a lot of points. And now they're building on the line of scrimmage through the transfer portal. Walter Nolan, Princely Umanmielen. They're understanding now we can up our level of play with the big boys through the portal to compete at the highest level. I love that. They continue to evolve and adapt and embrace what modern college football is. I also think it's worth noting for Ole Miss, college football is shifting to where it is less important to win your conference to win a national championship. It used to be you pretty much have to win your conference, probably have to be a one-loss team at least in the SEC, maybe undefeated to make it to the college football playoff, and then you got to go make a run. Right now, not only is Nick Saban out of the picture in the SEC, but Ole Miss, if they win 10 ball games, they're in the dance. They can miss going to Atlanta entirely and still make a run at this thing when it comes to winning national championships. It's more important to be hot at the right time, and I think that quite honestly favors Lane Kiffin and the way that his football team is built. When you talk about commitment and acquiring talent, I don't know how Ole Miss stacks up with the A&Ms of the world and the Alabamas of the world. I don't know that they have that level of commitment, but I would say the commitment to Lane Kiffin and giving him what he needs to be successful, checking a lot of boxes at this point. Because you don't sign the portal class that Lane Kiffin has signed over the course of his time in Oxford without some NIL resources, and also the way that they've championed Lane Kiffin to just be Lane Kiffin. Like, the reason why I love Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss is because Lane Kiffin's not for everybody. And that's not throwing shade at Lane Kiffin. You know who else wasn't for everybody? Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. But they won, and so their school supported them and embraced them. I think Lane Kiffin, the way that he beats to his own drum, Ole Miss is just on board with it, and they're more on board with it because he's had some results here. I think Ole Miss is going to continue to gain steam in this expanded playoff era. So for me, Ole Miss is at number 4 in my projected rankings for the top 5 teams in the SEC over the course of the next 3 seasons. Now, here's where it gets a little bit murky. I think you quite honestly can make a case for any of these next 3 teams we're going to talk about to be the top team in the conference going forward. At number 3, I got LSU. Again, it's a taste test, but for me, it's death, taxes, and Brian Kelly winning a whole lot of football games. Right? Like, he's coached, I believe, close to, if not more than 400 ball games as a head coach in college ball. He's won north of 70% of those. Okay, so he's going to win. Since he's been at LSU, the 2 years, 2 10-win seasons, 1 Heisman Trophy winner, 2 top 10 recruiting classes, and right now, at the time of us being live, they got the number 1 doggone class in 2025. Mic drop. So again, if you're making a case for LSU to be the top team over the course of the next 3 years, you got a lot of, I think, juice behind that. If this were strictly a power ranking for this upcoming season, I'd have LSU at 2. I think LSU at 2 makes a whole lot of sense. Now, they have 3 different coaches that have won national titles since 2000. That tells us loud and clear, the ingredients are right there for you to be successful at LSU. From fertile recruiting ground to the resources to the brand itself, you can win at LSU. 3 different guys have done it since 2000. So LSU, without question, I think, has a chance to make some real noise here over the course of the next 3 seasons. I said I'd have them at 2 when it came to power ranking. That's going off of what we know. Because, again, this is a projection. So I'm not predicting LSU to finish second in the SEC. I'm saying power ranking for stability, I'd put LSU at 2. Want to make sure we're on the same page there. Now, when it comes to, and that's based on track record, based on resume, LSU has the second best resume, in my mind, of what teams have done in the SEC. That's the reason why we have Brian Kelly as our second best coach in college football right now. Now, at number 2, I have the Texas Longhorns. And quite frankly, the reason why I don't have LSU higher on this projection ranking list and the reason why I have Texas at 2 ahead of them is because I truly think Steve Sarkisian is just getting started. I think he's just getting started. I mean, what he's done at Texas since he's been there, it is such a difficult lift to culturally get Texas to where they are right now. Because when he took it over, that was the talking point, right? Hey, boosters, they got their hand in the cookie jar all the time. Too many cooks in the kitchen. You can't really just do your thing as a head coach. The culture, it's rotten. You got to fix it. Steve Sarkisian has now moved past the growing pain stage and into the, hey, we're going to win a lot of football games stage as they move into the SEC. Texas is at a place from a commitment level where they're all in. And Steve Sarkisian, going back to that conversation around boosters, he's either, one, been able to win enough to where you're not probably having too many cooks in the kitchen because you trust the cook himself, which is Steve Sarkisian, or he's managing those folks effectively enough to still not have it impact the on-field product. From a recruiting standpoint, I mean, they're killing it in the portal. Isaiah Bond, Amari Nyblack, Adonai Mitchell last season. Heck, a guy named Quinn Ewers, you got him through the portal as well. People forget. From the high school level, the last 3 years, 2022, number 5 class, 2023, number 3 class, 2024, the number 6 class. Yeah, I think they're just fine. I think Steve Sarkisian, his personal journey and his time he spent with Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa, I think that provided a lot of clarity to what he wants to be as a head football coach, to how to win as a head football coach, perfecting his own process, and now they're just straight up executing it. And again, I think over the course of the next 3 years, by how they've recruited, by the way they are cooking and the momentum they have, I think they're just getting started for me, the number 2 team when it comes to my projection rankings within the SEC going forward. Now, at number 1, we don't got to overthink it. We don't got to overthink this here, brother. It's Georgia. They have the best coach in the sport in college football, which is Kirby Smart. They are allergic to recruiting outside of the top 3. The brand recruits itself now, too. Like, Georgia's at a point where I wholeheartedly believe kids want to come play at Georgia. And Georgia, yes, they still have to win some recruiting battles. There's no way around that. But for the most part, like, they're not having to pump up what they're going to be or try and sell this vision like Georgia is what Georgia is, man. They've won 2 national titles the last 3 years. I think they had the best football team purely last year, if we're just going to be honest here. If they were healthy, I think Georgia probably would have won the national championship. And that's not throwing shade at Michigan. Maybe it would have been a close game. But I think Georgia, just from an overall roster standpoint, best team in college football the last 3 seasons. And so going back to my point here, you're not trying to pump up the brand. You're just showing kids what it is and saying, listen, you come to Georgia, we're going to compete. You're going to practice hard, but guess what? By doing those things, by going through our process, you're going to develop. And by developing as a football player and by buying into our culture, you're going to win a whole lot of football games, probably get some jewelry. It's going to be a good time. You want to come play for Georgia? And kids that buy into that do exactly what Kirby Smart says they're going to do. And so what I want to make sure we emphasize here, Kirby Smart and the team's competitive DNA that he's built year in and year out at Georgia is different now. It's a different competitive DNA. And they've built it by how they practice and by who they practice against. Like, you got 4 and 5 stars starting out on the scout team, running against, the ones where you're over there giving a look. You don't think that makes the ones better? You don't think that makes the guys on the scout team a little bit better? You don't think that raises the competitive temperature of the practice facility? I promise you it does. Other part of that is whenever you are practicing the way that Georgia does, you have no choice but to become a little bit more mentally tough, a little bit more calloused. Like Bloody Tuesday, it's a real thing. Bloody Tuesday, for those of y'all that don't know, in Athens, that is the most physical practice of the week for Georgia. You talk to Georgia players, they talk about 2 things, their DNA traits and how the games are easier because of how they practice. They say practice is the hard part. We get to the game, we're like thankful to be on Saturday and just be able to play ball, hit another color. So all that's to say, I don't think that machine is stopping anytime soon. Commitment-wise, you have what you need if you're Kirby Smart. There's no questioning how much commitment you're getting from Georgia, how many yeses he's getting when you come to Kirby Smart. It's real. It's real. It's sustainable because we've seen under Kirby Smart, and I've said this a few times now, the personnel under him has changed multiple times, from quarterback to coordinators to who you have on defense. Like, we've seen them lose, regroup, rebuild, refill that production. It's a factory. It's an assembly line, and I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon. So Georgia, for me, is the number 1 team when it comes to our projection rankings for the SEC. Now, with that being said, there were a couple other teams that I considered here putting in this top 5. Reasons why I couldn't do that, I'll explain, but this is my other teams that I consider putting this top 5. Tennessee, the Josh Heupel effect. He recruits the quarterback position, I think, as well as anybody else in the country. You saw that flash year in 2022. I'm looking for a little bit more sustained success over the long term before I put them in that top 5. But if we do this next year, I wouldn't be surprised if we put Tennessee into this conversation at all. A&M, similar thought process. I don't know what Mike Elko is going to be as a head coach at A&M. I'm waiting to see if they can really put it together. But the ingredients are there. The ingredients have really been there for a minute now, if we just want to be honest. But Mike Elko, the structure he brings, the talent they have, and the commitment they have in College Station to making their football team better, to making their football team one of the top teams in the country. 0 questions. I think it's as good as anybody else in America. Other team I talked about here that I probably could have thrown in the mix, Auburn. I believe in Hugh Freeze. We haven't seen enough yet on the field for me to feel good about putting them in the top 5 over the next 3 years. I believe in Hugh Freeze. He's going to attack the talent side of things from the portal to recruiting. They will win at Auburn. To what degree and how soon, I don't know, but they're going to win at Auburn. I'll just say that. Also, Missouri, again, sustained success, but the care factor they have with people giving anonymous donations north of $60 million, keep an eye on Missouri. So, again, my top 5 when it comes to our projection rankings within the SEC. From 5 to 1 at number 5, you got Alabama. No shade on Alabama. I'm waiting to see what Kalen DeBoer is as a recruiter in the SEC. He's done more with less. Can you do more with more and win at the highest level? I can't wait to see it. Bama at 5. At number 4, I got Ole Miss. They're all in on Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin, all he does is win and attack the portal. They're embracing modern college football. I think they'll be rewarded for that, like they have been previously, but they will be in the expanded playoff format over the course of the next 3 seasons. LSU at 3, death taxes, Brian Kelly winning a whole lot of ball games. They're trending the right way without question. You could put them at 2, but at 2 I got Texas because I don't think Steve Sarkisian is anywhere near his best as a coach just yet. Or I don't think Texas is their best under Steve Sarkisian, so I'll put him at 2. Georgia, number 1 in the country and in the SEC for me over the course of the next 3 seasons as it stands right now. Let's not overthink it. Best coach, recruiting like an animal. Georgia's number 1 in my projection rankings for the SEC over the course of the next 3 years. But hey, get in the live chat. Let me know. Get in the comment section too. Let me know who you believe is your top 5 in the SEC over the next 3 seasons. Our projection rankings, yours now to unpack. And we'll do some of that too. I think we'll do that for all the power conferences. We'll do that for the Big Ten, the ACC, all that going forward. So it'll be a good time. Looking forward to us getting into that together now. Should be a whole lot of fun. Whole lot of fun. I'm excited to hear from y'all too. There's a lot of great responses on Twitter. That's the best part of this, man. The back and forth, the interaction. Again, make sure you follow me there. We should have an announcement for y'all later today on who our next head coach is going to be that we're interviewing. Got a couple of them. One of them in the future actually may even be on that list that we just mentioned. So we'll get to that here. The transfer portal is absolutely wild. It went so quickly. There was so much to unpack between the guys changing places and who went where, like all that. There was a lot of, I think, specifically quarterbacks that changed places. A lot of quarterbacks that I believe were off the radar a little bit when it comes to where they ended up landing. A lot of good quarterbacks that I think are going to make a pretty solid impact this upcoming season that I think we need to talk about together. Let's start with the good folks in Madison, Wisconsin. Luke Fickell went out and got Tyler Van Dyke from Miami. Now, Tyler Van Dyke, it's no secret, the latter half of his career in Coral Gables did not go as he thought it would, did not go as the good folks in Miami thought it would, because early on in his career at Miami, we're talking about dude being like a top 5 quarterback in college football, saying how long is he going to stay in Coral Gables? Can they keep him at Miami for an extended period of time? Well, he was really successful at Miami, in my opinion, because of the system that he played in, where he was comfortable under Rhett Lashley on an air raid system. He's getting back to what works now. Getting back to the basics, are we, if we're Tyler Van Dyke? Going to go play for Phil Longo at Wisconsin? I like that a lot. I think Tyler Van Dyke getting back to what he's comfortable doing is just a good overall approach. Don't be surprised now if the boys in Madison under Luke Fickell start winning some ball games. Would not shock me at all. Now, KJ Jefferson to UCF was one of my favorite off-the-radar transfer portal quarterback moves of this entire spring, or I guess winter is really what it was. Here's what I want to say. Not everyone knows how to utilize a big quarterback. Okay, KJ Jefferson, 6'3", 247 pounds. That's a big dude. I'll say that again. KJ Jefferson, 6'3", 247. Not everyone knows how to utilize a big quarterback. Gus Malzahn, he knows how to use a big quarterback. It's like being forklift certified. You could probably be okay if you mess around with it for long enough and kind of get by. Being forklift certified, you know what you're doing. Gus Malzahn, he is big quarterback certified with what he did with Cam Newton. I'm not saying KJ Jefferson is Cam Newton. Do not hear me incorrectly. But I think the success that he had with someone like a Cam Newton and being able to utilize quarterback run the right way and call that well to his abilities, I think that matters, and I think you're going to see success for KJ Jefferson at UCF. UCF, it's worth noting, the Big 12 is wide open. The UCF is now in the Big 12. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch them. I really believe that they're going to be one of those teams that's a sleeper. Also, Andy Staples, I believe he has a sit-down one-on-one interview with Gus Malzahn that is currently on the On3 YouTube channel, so go check that out. But KJ Jefferson obviously transferring over from Arkansas. I like that. I like that a whole lot. Now let's move on to who transferred to Arkansas as KJ Jefferson pivoted out of there. Taylon Green was previously at Boise State. Taylon Green is 6'6", 221 pounds. If you watch his highlight tape, he is jumping over people. Y'all, if you're 6'6", 221, and you don't play in the NBA, you should not be elevating to the levels of the earth that Taylon Green is elevating to. So I don't know if he is refined enough to have the success they want to have long-term at Arkansas, but I'll tell you what, Bobby Petrino, strong track record of working with quarterbacks. We've seen his offense thrive when he has a mobile quarterback like Taylon Green is. I like that fit a lot. That's one that I think is potentially a powder keg in the SEC. Arkansas, keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on Taylon Green, the Boise State transfer. Here's another one I want to get to within the SEC. Blake Shapen was previously at Baylor, and I saw with my own two eyes early in Blake Shapen's career walk into the Big 12 championship game. Gary Bohannon, the starting quarterback at that point in time, was hurt. Baylor's playing Oklahoma State. The entirety of their season had led up to this moment, and it goes to a quarterback who I believe at that point was making, if not his first start, it was very, very, very early in his career. I watched this dude trot out there in Jerry World with ice in his veins, just get straight up buckets, go for 23 for 28, 3 touchdowns. He was dealing the pill like a shady pharmacist, like we like to say on this show. Blake Shapen going to Mississippi State. He's going to play under Jeff Lebby. I think that offense is going to cater to his skill set. Blake Shapen, the rest of his career at Baylor after he won the job over the previous starter, Gary Bohannon, didn't have the success that I think he wanted to have. I attribute a lot of that to the dysfunction and what they didn't have on that roster for Baylor offensively. That's not throwing shade at Baylor. I'm just saying Blake Shapen, he's got the tools. And I think if he's able to be the guy for Jeff Lebby in Starkville, could do good things. Could put up some points. So keep an eye on that. Max Johnson transferred from Texas A&M before transferring from LSU, before transferring now, or not before. Now he's transferring to North Carolina. I was trying to make a cool segue into that. Bottom line, he was at LSU, then A&M, now UNC. I always felt like he kind of got a raw deal when it came to the college football public and how he was discussed. I feel like he is much better than the way that people talk about him. He's tough. All I remember from this dude, like when you close your eyes and think of Max Johnson, the snapshot that comes to mind is this dude dropping back, game on the line, Thanksgiving weekend, taking a shot in the ribs as LSU's quarterback, throwing just a dime rock down the sideline, dropping the ball in the basket for a game-winning touchdown over A&M. Again, this is when he was at LSU. Went to A&M, didn't end up being the guy for them before having to step in place of Connor Wegman because he was injured. Bottom line, I like Max Johnson. And I like Chip Lindsey being his offensive coordinator at North Carolina. I think that's going to be a really good fit. Chip Lindsey obviously also has a strong track record working with quarterbacks. I think this is a really good fit. Max Johnson in a conference that's wide open at North Carolina in the ACC. Keep an eye on the Tar Heels. Would not surprise me if they made some noise this year. Also worth noting, Max Johnson, I believe he was one of the first, if not the first, transfer portal quarterback to find a home. He knew right away. He's like, hey, portal's open. I'm going to UNC. That's my guy. That's my spot. That's my fit. So good for UNC. Good for Max Johnson. Last one to get to here, Tyler Shuck at Louisville. Now, important to know here, you see the spelling. It's not show. It's Shuck. S-H-O-U-G-H. I know it sounds a little bit funny, but it is Shuck. 7th year, best year, baby. We're going to Louisville by way of Texas Tech. Jeff Brom, his success with quarterbacks should not be overlooked. Louisville, once again, going to the portal and getting a phenomenal class to go do some work with. The ACC, I've said it now multiple times, wide freaking open. They played for the conference last year. I think Tyler Shuck, if he's able to stay healthy, there's a reason why he's consistently won that job at Texas Tech. There's a reason why he has been successful throughout the course of his career in very, very small windows of time. So root for him, root for Louisville to get the Brom squad rolling a lot just because I think Jeff Brom's phenomenal. The football guy through and through. Keep an eye on the cards and Tyler Shuck. Lucky number 7, baby. We love it. So those are the off-the-radar portal quarterbacks that I think we should all keep an eye on here. It's easy to get caught up in the smoke now. Cam Ward, Will Howard. Who else am I missing? Who else transferred? Cam Ward, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, Dante Moore. A lot of big-time guys transferred around. Those are more the under-radar guys that hit the portal and I think found a pretty good fit for themselves. Hey, Nick, appreciate you trying to step in and help me there, brother. I don't think the mic caught that up, but you were on it. You were on it getting in there, so I appreciate you making a play there. All right, one more segment to get to here that I want to hear from y'all, so make sure you're getting into live chat right now. Make sure you've liked the video. It's important. Just helps us algorithmically to keep this good thing going. It's still recruiting season. It's always recruiting season in college football, but 2025 is off and running, and wouldn't you know it, man, LSU, they are recruiting, as we like to say on this show, they are recruiting like a program. Currently the #1 class in the 2025 On3 industry team recruiting rankings. They got not one, not two, but 3 top players at their position, the best wide receiver in the country in De'Corian Moore, the best running back in the country in Harlem Berry, and the best quarterback / #1 player in the entire class in Bryce Underwood. So what does it mean for LSU? What does it mean for Brian Kelly? What's the impact of this whole thing? That's what we talk about right here on this show. Make sure you're subscribed. Okay, call to action here. If you're watching the show live, hit the subscribe button. If you're watching this as a one-off video, we talk ball, we talk recruiting, we talk portal, we talk all things college football because just quite frankly, it's the greatest sport on the face of the planet, and we are very, very fortunate to get to cover it here on a daily basis. So make sure you're locked in there. We appreciate you for that. So what does it mean? Well, first things first, it means the myth is busted. And quite honestly, the myth has been busted. And you know what myth I'm talking about, that Brian Kelly can't / won't recruit. Let's take a look at what the numbers say, huh? 2023, #5 class. That's fine. You can do that one time. 2024, another top 10 class, #7. In 2025, as I just mentioned a moment ago, they got the #1 class in the entire country, in all of college football. And Phillip Dukes, who's a national recruiting analyst for us here at On3, host of the 5-Star Flex over on the On3 Recruits channel, was kind enough to join us on this platform last week. And I thought he put it perfectly. When Brian Kelly got to Baton Rouge, punchline culture had a field day. He's not a fit. He doesn't know what he's doing in the SEC. They're going to eat him alive over there. He's got a fake Southern accent. He's on TikTok dancing with recruits. A lot of people were quick to make jokes and try and win Twitter. That's fine. That's totally fine. But Phillip Dukes said it perfectly. People saw jokes. I saw a coach making an effort in a place that embraces you when you make an effort in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And now, honestly, recruiting at its base level, yes, NIL is a factor now, I understand that, but at its base level, recruiting is about relationships and about what Brian Kelly was applying there, which is effort. And those kind of shake hands, quite honestly, because effort is important to any strong relationship that you develop, whether it be recruiting or otherwise. So it's just scary now because you have all that you need to be successful in Baton Rouge. We've seen it now. 1, 2, 3 coaches have all won national championships since the year 2000. 3 different coaches now, okay? So what I'm trying to tell you is I think Brian Kelly is as good a coach as the majority of those, the other being Nick Saban, so take that as you will. It's scary. All you have, or all you need rather, is in your backyard if you're Brian Kelly. Here's the important part. Phillip also mentioned this. Duke's the Scoop. Tremendous follow on Twitter again. Subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel too. Word to the wise. The brand is on fire. Okay, the brand is on fire because the offensive brand, I think, for LSU has never been hotter with what guys are doing in the NFL. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, the cats from that 2019 team that all these recruits got to see on their television screen growing up. And then also, you just poured gasoline on this whole thing because Jaden Daniels won the Heisman, and you had Malik Neighbors, who I think is probably going to be close to a first-round pick, if not a first-round pick, in this upcoming NFL draft. So you have an offensive brand that is attractive to playmakers, okay? Now, you've always had the defensive brand that speaks for itself. And last year was what it was. Teams have down years. It is what it is. But like LSU historically has always been in that DBU conversation, regardless of who the head coach is. And you had the Honey Badger, who's doing his thing in the NFL. And these guys that I'm mentioning in the NFL, I understand they didn't play for Brian Kelly, but it still matters from an optics point of view for these recruits to see guys go to a certain school, have success to where they want to have success at in the NFL, which is where all these guys aspire to be at. So now, the thing that I want to say for LSU, and we're seeing it reflect on the recruiting trail and the opportunity for them going forward, you have elite sales pitches on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. You want to come here and play defense? Go look at the guys that are playing in the league right now. Go ask your friends who DBU is, and you'll have a discussion. There'll be a good argument that LSU will be in that debate. You want to come play offense here? You want to go catch touchdowns? Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, they also wore these colors. They scored a lot of touchdowns. You want to play quarterback here? Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, they both won the Heisman Trophy here, all right? Jaden Daniels worked with our quarterback coach, now offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan. So you want to come here, you can do that too. So what that is, I believe, is the opportunity to recruit a versatile team. A versatile team, recruiting offense and defense equally well. Because what that means for your team going forward now is you can play in different styles of games. You can play with the teams in the shootouts within your conference with Texas and Ole Miss. You can play the more physical style of games. You got to have more of a defensive battle. You can match up with Georgia a little bit more better than maybe you could previously. And the more versatile you can be, the more styles you can play, the better opportunity you have to win more ball games. That's massive. That's absolutely massive. Not to mention the fact that now you get to a 12-team playoff, and, I mean, it's dealer's choice who you could draw on that 12-team field. You could end up playing a team like a Michigan. You could end up playing a team like I guess you could play almost as well. You could play a team like an Oregon, like an Ohio State. Like, you don't know who you're going to draw. But any kind of style you have to play, you are better positioned to do that now because of how they can recruit. So what I want to leave you with here is Brian Kelly, he's recruiting. That myth has been busted. They're getting after it, and they are positioned for success in the future of college football because of how they're building their team and the sales pitches they have to build their team. So Baton Rouge, man, if you're calling Baton Rouge, they may or may not pick up because I think they're probably busy recruiting. It is what it is. All right, let's get to the live chat here and hear from y'all, man. The keeper of the queue, everyone's favorite producer, Nick Brake. Nick, what's going on, baby? How we living?
1 second. Man, this camera shot, I'm not even going to come in the shot today. We're having some
What
problems.
do you mean you're not coming in the shot today?
It doesn't. No, we don't have a good situation ready yet.
Okay, well, who?
So
okay.
I'm gonna be backstage here.
What do you mean we don't have a good situation?
Well,
what does that even mean?
Co-producers and I are just not quite set on a good little control room setup. So we're getting there. We're working on it.
What happened yesterday?
It didn't look good, JD. Maybe
you
you did. Maybe you think it did, and maybe it did. I don't know, but I don't think it did personally. So I'm gonna be back here.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
That sounds good. I can handle that. Hey, ideal college football field votes. The 12-team wins with 42%. Only 13% said that 16 teams in the future is the way to go. 37 said 6 to 8.
Okay.
5 said 4. So it sounds like people are in agreement that it should stay as it is, JD.
Okay. I'm interested that we had the 6 to 8 at 37%. That's pretty solid.
That's a pretty high
good
number.
Stuff there.
Yeah, that's a high number.
That's good stuff there.
Let's start with some questions. Gavin says, "Hey, it's been a minute. I missed you guys. Excuse me, this is a pretty good typo, but he's pretty much saying, would you rather have Jalen Milroe or Carson Beck as the quarterback of your football team?"
Man, I go with Carson Beck. I think with what I could do offensively, I feel like I'm more multidimensional. Now, it also depends what you have around him, because I think Jalen Milroe and what he did with his legs last year, in a lot of ways, kept Alabama in the position they were in long-term in the college football playoff format. But I'll go with Carson Beck. I feel like he's going to keep getting better. I mean, 70% completion percentage of his passes. I like where Carson Beck is right now, and I think he might be the first quarterback taken next year, Nick. I'll go with Carson Beck as my number one guy.
Okay, JD, I'm on cam now.
Okay. All right.
It's optically, it is very challenging. I'm right 10 feet away from the screen. I'm wearing my glasses today.
Okay.
So that's better. But this next question is coming from Braxton.
Hey, way to bet on yourself there.
I'm betting on myself.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll try. Did you see where the NCAA president came out and said he feels no sympathy for the coaches that complain about the transfer portal landscape? What do you think?
I don't know that I saw that headline. I mean, quite honestly, if that is an accurate quote, I don't disagree, because I feel two ways. There's one side of things where if you're a G5 coach, you're getting just absolutely ravaged through the portal. I understand. I probably have more sympathy there. But when it comes to the Power 5 level, I'm like, okay, you've asked for a long time to be able to, have some player mobility here. You've had many situations where we're hoping kids can get waivers, and we're saying, why can't they play? They should get a waiver. And we still kind of have some of that. But, honestly, I feel like we've opened Pandora's box. It is what it is. It is what it is at this point, quite honestly. So I don't have a ton of sympathy. A lot of people were calling for this, and here we are. But I do have sympathy for the schedule, man. It's absolutely brutal calendar.
JD, I apologize to everyone who was hating on me because the mic wasn't on. Guys, I only have 50 other things going on right now, JD.
Hey, you're good, man.
Hey, this next question, Javier says, JD, what do you think it would mean for Florida's season if they lose to all of the other Power 5 Florida teams on their schedule?
It'd be tough. I mean, we talked about that a little bit on a previous live show. It's tough because in that state, optics are so huge. And so to be seen as the third team on the totem pole in your state. It's not a situation you want to be in as you try and recruit the most, or arguably the most talent-heavy high school, I'll rephrase that, arguably the most talent-rich state when it comes to high school talent. So it's massive. It's massive. I think optics are everything this year for Florida, and it starts with those games against their in-state rivals.
JD, next question's coming from The Truth. Asking about, in your opinion, who do you think the surprise national title contender will be this year? Obviously, last year, Washington, year before, TCU. There's always going to be one. Who is it this year?
That's a great question. Well, if we're going with purple, Nick, who wears purple? Northwestern?
LSU.
Hey, LSU. Yeah, that's probably a better play as LSU. No shade to Northwestern. Northwestern keeps catching strays in this show, man. I love Evansville in Illinois. Never been there, but I love that that's the campus and where it's at. It looks beautiful. Yeah, man, I think some sneaky teams. I really think Texas Tech is going to be awesome this year. They don't wear purple, but I think them and Joey McGuire, it's been building for a while there. It's kind of been ruminating. I think they have a chance to be really good this year. I think Tennessee is going to be interesting to watch with Nico. Those two teams, I think, are probably in the sleeper category just because they're probably not even picked to win their conference for most places. But I think they're probably that sleeper mold. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case. What do you say, Nick? One more?
One more. Let's do it. Okay, here, I'm going to pull it up. The last question coming from Willie says, JD, if Georgia happened to end up outside of the top 3 in recruiting, who would you guess would be the top 3? So excluding Georgia, who do you think the top 3 teams in the recruiting landscape?
I think it would be LSU. They've been on a tear. We just talked about them. I think Ohio State is cooking. All right, people say a lot of things about Ryan Day. That's fine. Say what you want. They have been pushing the envelope when it comes to acquiring talent. I think they'd probably be in that top 3. And I think Texas, too. I think Texas and Steve Sarkisian, they're 100% attractive, I would have to imagine, to the high school recruits at this point with what they just did this past year, with what Austin presents, with the brand of Texas football. So all those things, I think, combined for them to be top 3 teams. With that being said, I would be wildly surprised if Georgia was on the outside looking into that top 3. They're pretty much top 3 every single year, and you can take it to the bank. So we'll see if it ever happens, but I'd be surprised if Georgia wasn't in the top 3. Hey, good stuff today, Nick. Battling through. Getting a shot, turn on the mic.
Yeah, we got to figure something out over here because I'm like, we'll figure it out, man. I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Well, I appreciate you fighting.
Absolutely. Yeah, see you, man.
Man of the people. Program guy through and through. Nick, heavy lifter break. We are back on the air tomorrow morning. I'll plug this one more time. We don't have it shot just yet. We have it scheduled, so I want to speak cautiously before anything becomes concrete, so I don't want to tell you who it is. We have a coach's interview set for today to record, to air tomorrow morning. You will know who that is if you're following me on Instagram and on Twitter at JD Piquel. Both platforms, I will publish that information as soon as we have it. It's a Power 5 head coach, Power 4 head coach, whatever. Make sure you're locked in. The announcement we make today will not be the last one we make over the course of the next couple days. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.